Hello, dear students. Today we're going to complete the rest of Chapter 2, Part 2, The First of the Three Spirits by Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol. In this part, we continue the rest of Chapter 2, Part 2. Here we move to the third shadow. Scrooge and the first spirit went to another place and saw a large, kind-looking old gentleman sitting at a high desk. Scrooge cried excitedly, "Good heavens, it's old Fezziwig! God bless him!" Now, do you know who was Fezziwig? Yes, he was Scrooge's employer when he was a young man. He called Ebenezer Dick his clerks when it was 7 o'clock. "No more work tonight. It's Christmas, remember." Now, what does this show about character? Yes, he was a cheerful character, as it was clear in his rich, deep, happy voice. If we compare between Fezziwig and Scrooge, we find that he was unlike Scrooge. Fezziwig celebrated Christmas. The two young clerks put away all the pens and papers and, following Fezziwig's orders, cleared all the furniture away from the center of the room as they were getting ready to celebrate for Christmas. If we want to describe Fezziwig's character, what can you say? Well, you can say Fezziwig was caring, friendly, kind, and generous, as he asked his clerks to finish work early on Christmas Eve. He held a party, paid for the food and the fiddler, and invited his clerks, family, friends, and neighbors, even poor people like the milkman and the cook, to enjoy Christmas. When it was 11 o'clock, the dancing ended. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig stood by the door, shaking hands with each person as he or she went out, and wishing him or her a Merry Christmas. Scrooge remembered and enjoyed it all with the greatest delight. At the end, the ghost said, "It seems easy enough to amuse these childish people. It was nothing much that Fezziwig did, was it? After all, he only spent a few pounds on food and drink and paying the fiddler." This shows how Fezziwig was a generous man, unlike Scrooge. But when Scrooge replied, guess what did he say? He said warmly, "It isn't a question of money." And he was speaking like the young man he used to be long time ago, not the old man he was now. He said, "No, Spirit. You see, our employer can make us happy or sad. His words, his looks, all these things are so important. The happiness that he gives is just as valuable as money." Here we see that these words said by Scrooge warmly were the effect of seeing the third shadow. He is beginning to change. Then we see another shadow, or another change that happened to Scrooge. Guess what? When he said, "I'd like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk now." Can you imagine Scrooge saying, "I'd like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk now"? Here he regretted his unkind treatment to Bob, his employee, when he remembered how kind and generous Mr. Fizwick was to his employees. Now we move to the fourth shadow. The previous one was the third shadow. Now we are going to move to the fourth shadow. Now Scrooge could see himself again. He was older now, and it was clear that he was beginning to show an unhealthy interest in money. This was very clear. His eyes were restless, his mouth looked thin and mean. He was not alone, but was sitting beside a lovely young girl, and she was crying. Can you guess why was she crying? This shows that there was something that made her feel upset. Can you guess what happened? We'll see. This shows that he was materialistic and cared about money, as it became his aim. Belle, his beloved, said softly, "You care about gold more than you care about me. Perhaps I shouldn't be sad. Money will give you the happiness that I wanted to give you." Here Scrooge cared about money more than getting married and having children. But Scrooge replied, "But I haven't changed towards you, have I?" Then Belle answered him back by saying, "You have changed. We promised to marry a long time ago, when we were both poor and happy to be poor. I have stayed the same, but you have different hopes and dreams now. I love the man that you used to be, but I know that you do not wish to marry me anymore." Finally, she told him that he was free and he can be happy in the life he chose, and she left. "Spirit," cried Scrooge, "show me no more. Take me home. This is too painful." Here we see the effect of the fourth shadow, as Scrooge couldn't stand watching his past shadows and wrong choices. He regrets everything he did. Now they were in another place near the fire. Sat a beautiful young girl. Scrooge thought she was the girl that he had just seen, until he saw her. Now a good-looking married lady sitting opposite her daughter. The room was full of children, noise, shouting and laughing. We learn from this part that his beloved enjoyed her life marrying somebody else. Then her husband appeared, carrying Christmas presents, and told her that he saw her old friend Scrooge sitting alone in his office, and his partner was dying. Do you know who was his partner? Yes, his partner was Marley, exactly. Next, Scrooge asked the spirit in a broken voice to take him away from this place. Here Scrooge doesn't like being lonely. He remembers that he is lonely. He is alone, as he refused to marry his beloved Belle and preferred to make money. Scrooge couldn't stand watching all these shadows. Therefore he said, I can't watch anymore. It's too awful. Leave me alone, spirit. At the end, Scrooge found himself back in his own bedroom again, feeling very tired. He climbed into bed and at once fell into a deep, heavy sleep. Finally, in this part, we know that Scrooge regretted all his bad treatment to Bob and Fred. He also regretted his wrong choices and having unhealthy interest in money that made him live a lonely, miserable life. Dear students, this was the end of chapter 2, part 2. Thank you for watching.